A, don't ever, 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 never, ever bring the snake with you. Don't care if you think it's dead or not, because we have had cases where people have just knocked the snake out, put it in a bag, brought it to the hospital, opened up the hospital. Now you have a very awake, very PO'd snake.
Clock in, scrub up, and join us behind the red line. You're listening to First Case, a perioperative podcast bringing you exciting interviews, engaging discussions, and innovative solutions that are changing the way patients receive surgical care. Each episode, we talk to frontline staff, perioperative leadership, and nursing entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the back table to the boardroom, from wheels in to wheels out, we tackle the real-life issues affecting the OR. Whether you're tuning in for surgical service education or inspiration, we're glad you're here. And now, it's time to roll back and start the first case.
On today's episode of First Case, we're speaking with Dr. Glenn Barnes, Associate Clinical Professor of Nursing at UT Tyler in Tyler, Texas. And I just don't even know where to start to introduce this interview or our guest, because we train often for emergencies that happen in the hospital or patients who might be hurting or injured who come to us, but we don't often think about what happens outside the facility, or if we are just with a group of friends and an emergency happens or a natural disaster happens and we have to just jump in and help. Because as healthcare providers, people are going to look to us for our expertise and for our training, whether we feel like we're qualified or not to be able to give any advice. And Dr. Barnes bridges that gap, and he helps teach that first aid, wilderness survival training. And I'm so excited that we get to talk to him today.
Melanie, all I have to say to our listeners is pull over, stop what you're doing, get something to write with, and open your ears, because he is going to pull you in with his passion and his knowledge, and you're going to learn so much. I know we did. We could have kept talking to him all day. So listen, because you're going to learn things, and bug in, bug out, bug up, bug down, whatever you want to do. Glenn Barnes is fascinating.
Yeah. So get ready to learn. Grab a pen and paper and hang on to your first aid kits, because we'll be right back with Dr. Glenn Barnes.
Hi, I'm Chris Blevins.
And I'm Melanie Perry.
From the studios of Healthcare HQ, you're listening to First Case.
Joining us now is Glenn Barnes, Associate Clinical Professor of Nursing at UT Tyler in Tyler, Texas. And Glenn, when I was lining up guests for this season, I put out a message on LinkedIn asking my network for experts on disaster preparation and planning. And one of my friends, Joe Chuya, messaged me immediately and said, "You have got to talk to Glenn. He teaches this really cool class on survival." So I was like, well, yeah, of course we have to talk to Glenn. So Glenn, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored.
Oh, I am so excited. And we really do have a lot of content to cover today, and just a really interesting conversation to have. And I want to get right into it. So why don't you just start with telling us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your background?
Okay. My name's Glenn, and I got my doctorate from the Texas Tech University. My doctorate project was actually working in pathogen response, and this was pre-COVID, and working with the infectious disease response unit for the state of Texas. My background is pretty varied. I've been a nurse for about 34 years. I also have 28 years of military background, including a former Army Green Beret. And after 9/11, I went back into the military as a Navy nurse and was tasked to train federal law enforcement in emergency response post 9/11. And I did that for about 2 years.
That's awesome. You've had my mouth is open, Glenn.
What do you say
just
after
like
that?
I'm like, okay, that's enough for like 5 lifetimes. And
it really is.
So can I ask you, how did your military experience influence the courses that you teach now? And if you don't mind just telling us, what exactly are you teaching now?
I'm teaching a course that I developed called Nursing in Non-Traditional Environments. And it's a 3-pronged course that teaches nurses how to work in austere environments, so wilderness medicine. And University of Texas at Tyler is only one of 2 schools that teaches this. It is us and a school in Norway. So when I say there's only 2 schools teaching it, I'm talking about teaching it on the planet.
Oh my God.
And we actually certify nursing students in the Wilderness Life Support for Medical Professionals International Certification.
What a cool certification.
It really is.
I want that certification.
Come on. I'm
do you
open to anybody.
Online?
Unfortunately, no.
Do this online.
It's kind of hard to simulate starting a fire online.
That's so sad.
And then we do disaster management, and they get a FEMA certification for the Community Emergency Response Team and the Essentials of Disaster Life Support certifications in that. And then we wrap it up with global health. And I chose those 3 tenets of the course because they all carry the same pedagogy of using nursing interventions and improvisations with intentional improvisation, not just fly by the seat of your pants. Because one of the main reasons I did this course is that nurses were not being trained to do disaster care. They might get a little course or a little, maybe a day on it. And I think Texas A&M does a really good job, but it's still very limited in what they do. So to get in there and get full courses and certifications from FEMA and the National Disaster Life Support Foundation, I think is an incredible step forward in preparing these nurses to step into those roles when disaster strikes. My wife was called forth she's also a nurse, and she responded to Katrina in one of the medical needs shelters. And she had worked with the Red Cross and saw how ill-prepared the nurses, not of their own fault, they're not being trained, but they're being asked to step in. And as nurses, we go in there and we do the best job we can do, which is probably better than most because we're great at flying by the seat of our pants, but we shouldn't have to.
Right. Well, and
amen to that.
Glenn, I can tell you, so I was on the CERT team in Ellis County, and awesome. I was one of the medical liaisons, and I am not a nurse. I am a certified surgical technologist, but all of the FEMA training and the training I got from the Department of Emergency Medicine in Dallas County, like that helped me. And those skills I was able to use during Hurricane Harvey and some small tornadoes that we had in that area. Central Texas, just as well as I do, right? So I would say that, your training can extend and help people outside of the field of nursing. Absolutely. And I wonder if you've been able to assist, volunteers, just of citizens abroad in being able to help, because I think in times of need, there's not a shortage of people that want to help. They just don't have a clue how, right?
Exactly. And we do get them in touch with, during the global health phase, we have international organizations that are actually located in East Texas, Mercy Ships and Mercy Works, come and speak to the students and see, so that they could continue on with them. We also get in touch with the local CERT teams. And so I don't actually run a CERT team, but I do train them and make them CERT qualified. So should they want to go on a CERT team, they absolutely could do that. The one time I absolutely know that this training benefited, one of my students came up and said, Dr. Barnes, you'll never believe I came up on a car accident. I'm thinking, wow, you're pretty pumped about coming on
really
a car
excited.
accident. She goes,
not normal.
And this person's arm was just really broken. And I'm like, okay, probably shouldn't be that happy about someone with a broken arm. She goes, and I made a splint out of a magazine.
Whoa! So yeah, that's cool though to be excited about what they can do.
And then I was excited because she had taken the improvised splinting portion that we teach and put it into practice and actually splinted and rendered care when she didn't have the proper traditional items that we normally have, which is why the course is called Nursing in Non-Traditional Environments.
Right. Okay, so first, I want to back up just a little bit, and both of you are throwing around an acronym that you both know what means, CERT, and we've talked about it already this season, but just for anybody listening who doesn't know what that stands for, what does CERT stand
CERT
for?
is the Community Emergency Response Team, and it is a FEMA community organization. And what they do is they take just regular mom and pop that no specific medical training or any other kind of training, and they provide them with the skills and training to self-extricate from a disaster and to actually have a community-based response team. Because let's face it, EMS, during a major disaster, EMS are tasked out at priorities, which are nursing homes, hospitals, and the people on your local street may be a little further on down the list. And so if you can pull together as a community, and that's one of the things that I stress even during the survival portions, is that, this is not the Lone Ranger concept. The final scenario is a really good example. It is a team-based scenario where a group of 5 or 6 nurses has to go and find a casualty. The basic scenario is that a tornado has gone through Tyler and has damaged both hospitals. So all EMS are now routed to the hospitals, getting patients transferred and that. But we have hikers at Tyler State Park that are missing, and they have to be found and treatment rendered, with the potential that they have to hold them overnight. So this is actually a high fidelity simulation where the casualties are in realistic moulage, and the search part really isn't that hard because this isn't a search and rescue course. They're pretty much just laying right there, but they have to move to them carrying all the gear that they're going to need to have to spend the night out on the wooded area of the campus. They have to assess the patient, stabilize the patient. They have to prepare the patient for transport and carry them about a half mile around Lake Harvey, which is the small lake on the middle of campus, because anybody can carry somebody 20 feet. You don't have to have a strong system for that. But if you want to stress the system, make them do a half mile. And they learn critical thinking. How do they reconfigure? How many times can they stop? As many times as you need. How do they take breaks? How do they manage personnel and time? So you have team building, critical thinking, all in this aspect of carrying a patient a half mile around a lake. Once they get back to the start point, they establish a base camp, and they actually have to make a tent or make a shelter with a tarp and some rope. They have to purify the water from Lake Harvey to drink, and they have to build a fire without matches or lighters.
Whoa.
Oh,
I feel like I can do 2 out of the 10 things you just mentioned. And I have a cert, like I was film trained. And I feel like I failed.
And, but the thing is, you're not there by yourself. So the parts that you're weak in, other people may be stronger at.
Yeah.
So, and that's the idea of these team-based processes, is that we learn to pull together and we learn to capitalize off each other's strengths. And so they also have to maintain that casualty overnight to include documentation. And I tell them, somewhere in the night, I'm going to throw a monkey wrench into your soup. And so the patient will either have a neural compromise from a splint that is too tight after it swells, or they might have a seizure, or if I find that they've left the patient unattended, I'll just kill them and they have to do CPR for 10 minutes, which is basically one person in that team has to be doing push-up. Well, not really push-ups, but they have to be pushing on the ground, and they can switch off as soon as they get tired, just like you would in CPR, but they have to keep that up for 10 minutes, and then the patient's back to life, and they don't do that no more.
Yeah. Okay, so I have to ask, this reminds me very closely. My son is currently in the Auburn ROTC program at Auburn University, and they go out with field training exercises every semester, and they have these like life-size realistic dummies that they have to drag and carry and train, and they're bleeding, and they learned so much of this stuff because obviously in the military you're going to have to.
Those simulators are awesome.
Do you use those as well?
No, I use real life people.
Oh.
Yes,
Oh, and they just have to carry somebody around and then work through the simulation.
Yes, they do.
Oh my! Okay.
And so,
don't do chest compressions on me, please. I don't want those.
No, there's no chest compressions on the people. They just do it on the ground.
Okay, good.
But yeah, I usually use nursing students because they can actually give active feedback if a treatment is being done properly or not.
No, I can see that. And also to be the student in the scenario helps you put those pieces together for what you would do if you were the person providing the aid.
Exactly.
To actually have that experience. That's really cool. I wouldn't think about it that way.
It's active learning, right?
It is.
It's absolutely the definition.
Yeah. Discovery learning, active learning. I'm a big fan of Fink's pedagogy of actual significant learning, where it's not just rote or regurgitation. You are actually living it and putting things together.
Yeah. Well, simulation is how you actually put all of your learning into practice and really nail it down in your head, because we can talk about it all day long, but until we do it,
right,
it doesn't actually come to life.
Yes.
I'm curious. I was looking at your website, and for all of you who are interested, he has a fantastic website on this wilderness survival. It's called crossedarrowstraining.com, and we'll provide that in our write-up so you can find that later. But I was looking at the courses that you teach, and you've got first aid, you've got first responder, you've got wilderness life support courses. What's the difference in these courses for the different things that you're offering?
So there are 3 levels of providership. The wilderness first aid is a basic first aid course that is good for people who have no medical background whatsoever. The first responder is good for police, EMS, firefighters, people that have a basic understanding of medical response. And then the wilderness life support for medical professionals is just what it says, medical professionals. So doctors, nurses, techs, surgical techs, because you already have a concept of the pathophysiology. So where the responders have a basic pathophysiology, but they have a very strong first responder, they know the things to do. They may not know the depth of patho, and we can go into that. Whereas the medical professionals, doctors and nurses, we understand the patho. So let's take that patho and place it in a different environment. So you may have a cerebral edema, but you'll have high altitude cerebral edema, where it's not an injury based, it is a pressure based.
Interesting.
Well, and we are so used to working in a controlled environment where we know exactly where it is, what we need. We're very OCD about, our things and our,
and sterility
and asepsis. Exactly. But so can you just tell me more about the wilderness life support, big takeaways from that kind of day in the life of somebody taking it?
So the course, we cover a huge list of disease processes, and we put them in the aspect of you are in an austere environment. So all of those things that you think about before, that sterility, we may be using somebody's shirt to stop a bleed. We will be looking at endemic diseases because you may be in another country. And do you understand the different types of malaria for the different regions that are in there where you're operating at? We talk about envenomations, so everything from bee stings to rattlesnake bites. And the idea that if you have one of those nifty little green Boy Scout snake bite kits, just throw it away because it's absolutely worthless.
Everybody says that.
It really is. It really is. And this whole thing about cutting the deal and sucking the poison out. Well, now you...
I was actually going to ask.
Yeah, no, because...
Don't do that.
As soon as your heart beats one time, that poison is systemic. So now all you've done is added 2 lacerations to an already compromised skin system.
Yeah. Well, Hollywood needs to stop with that.
Oh, yeah. Well, we could talk about Hollywood for a few days.
Look, so if I get bit by a venomous snake, are you telling me I'm just SOL? Like, am I just
absolutely
done?
Not. But
I'm already scared of them enough.
Yeah. No, well, one, you can be bit by a venomous snake, but not be envenomated, because there are such a thing as they call dry bites.
Right.
So say he just bit a rabbit and was going to eat on him later and then bite you, well, then he hasn't produced anymore.
Oh.
So you could have a dry venom bite.
So there's hope.
Yes. So there's hope. And the thing that a provider needs to do is just get you to a hospital, keep you calm, because nothing gets better with panic. because you have all of the stressor hormones that come out to play. Adrenaline is just a cascade of things that get worse if you're in panic mode. So if we keep them calm, don't put any kind of a tourniquet on that limb, and don't put ice on it, don't put heat on it, because you're not sure if it could be a neurotoxin, a hemotoxin, or some snakes actually have a combination of them.
Really?
So,
I would have thought a tourniquet would be a good idea.
You know, people think that.
Moving around.
But again, once your heart beats one time, you've already circulated the poison systemically.
So just get the heck out of Dodge.
So just get the heck out of Dodge and monitor, treat symptomatically. And the only thing that's going to stop venom is an antivenom. Kind of like defibrillation. The only thing that will stop fibrillation is defibrillation.
Right.
So if you have a snake venom, you need antivenom.
Which you're not going to have in your back pocket.
Probably not. Probably not.
Yeah. So,
but you should know which hospitals do have that. And if you call them ahead and say, oh, we got snake bit, well, don't ever, 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 never, ever bring the snake with you. Don't care if you think it's dead or not, because
I got that.
Yeah.
We have had cases where people have just knocked the snake out, put it in a bag, brought it to the hospital, opened up the hospital. Now you have a very awake, very PO'd snake.
And now you need two.
And we don't want that.
Two antivenoms or more.
Right.
We don't want that.
Right.
So I would think in all of that, like, if like the things that are affecting your patient are also going to affect the caregiver, like possibly hypothermia is an issue.
Yes.
But like your patient's going to be hypothermic, but so could you be, right? So like you don't have just one patient out there. Like you have to worry about yourself too.
Oh yes, we absolutely talk about the team, because you can be injured in transporting because you're now carrying additional weight over rough terrain. You have the risk of hyper or hypothermia, depending on your environmental conditions. And we talk about the different things, like if they go down with heat stroke, you can put yourself in heat exhaustion just trying to get them out. And so how do you monitor and maintain your hydration without putting yourself into a hydration-induced hyponatremia? So you've just drank so much water, you've flushed all your salts.
So, yeah.
So there's a lot more things because your environment is uncontrolled. So that's why we strict this course to medical professionals, because we don't need to teach the pathophys. We need to teach all the other stuff that builds onto this patho.
Right. So I think, too, you made me think, you're talking about, obviously, we're discussing wilderness survival. And, people go out into my husband has this very, very Alabama phrase. He talks about going out into the hinterbooney and just going out in the middle of nowhere. Well, you don't always have cell service. You don't always have the ability to call for help should something happen. So if someone is planning on going hiking or they're going camping or somewhere in a very austere environment, do you recommend that they take something for communication other than just their cell phone?
Yes. One, don't go alone. Because if you get hurt and you're alone, nobody can go get help. And help may be just walking up to the top of a ridge line where you would get cell phone service. But if you've got a broken ankle, you may not be able to do that yourself. And if you are going with someone else, leave a plan with someone that's not going to include check-in times and where you're going to be located. And if you haven't heard from me by this amount of time, send somebody out to look for me.
Yeah,
because we may both be SOL and need the help. And then definitely have alternate means of communication, whether they be signal mirrors, flares, cell phone, satellite phone. Just have your different communication plans. In the military, we call it PACE planning. So PACE, primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency. So have multiple redundancies, especially with safety equipment and communication.
So in my CERT training, we had to use I Am Responding, or Respondus, I believe was the app, in case cell tower, and we were ham certified. So I got to learn how to do walkie-talkie.
Yeah.
Oh, fun.
It was fun. It's like a little toy. I mean, I know it's serious, but it was fun.
Yeah.
It's serious,
and they have some
really cool.
good small footprint ham radios, hand-carried ham radios, that they just work off a different wavelength so that they actually can can reach those ravines and mountaintops a lot better.
Yeah, just something is better than nothing, I think, sometimes, right? So,
Absolutely. And having a pin flare. So if you think of that somebody could be looking for you and you fell down into a gully, you fire a pin flare up, somebody be like, oh, well, that's not normal. And maybe we should have somebody check that out.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, I know everybody can't take this survival course, and maybe it's not for everybody. You put them through the rigor. That's for sure. And in another episode, like we talked from my training, and there were certain things that like I have in my car, and my kids have them in their car, and there's like an Israeli bandage, a chest seal, cat tourniquet, quick clot, stuff like that.
Yes.
But what's your advice to anyone going out in nature, whether they have medical training, they don't have medical training? Like, what's your big five for anybody doing that?
Yeah. I'd say one, follow Maslow, because that dude had it locked down. So look at your base. I mean, let's face it, the guy's got a great concept there.
That's cool. Yeah.
Air, food, water, shelter. Those are your prime four. Now, we're not going to walk around in scuba tanks. I mean, one, is expensive, don't last that long, and you look really silly. But
and they're heavy.
But you can't have a mask, because if you look at the forest fires, if you look at a volcano eruption, if you look at any of the explosive catastrophes that we've had, the air quality has been polluted with particles. And those particles they can kill you right then, or they can cause you serious diseases years down the road. So having a way of filtering your air. So a simple bandana, or now since COVID, we're all carrying masks, and it's no big thing. We can get them everywhere. So have a pocket mask for filtration of the air. Have some type of means to purify water. And if you live in an area that doesn't have water laying around like it does in East Texas, then you want to carry water with you. And they have little sealed packets of water, to just having a water jug. But you also need a means of purifying that water. And there's multiple means: chemical purification, ultraviolet, filters. But know the filter and how effective it is, because some filters will work on viruses, some are good with bacteria. Look at your threat. What is your more prominent things that you have to worry about? And look at your expenses, because you don't want to go broke trying to prepare for a possible eventuality. I would rather somebody have a cheap something than trying to get money for an expensive nothing that they have. So air, water, food can be anywhere from granola bars to MREs. You can get sealed pack. If you're looking for your home, FEMA suggests you have at least 72, if not 96 hours worth of food, water, medicine, everything you need to be isolated. And some people go out and they get into full-blown tinfoil hat survival mode and buy a case of MREs.
It tastes awful. God,
yeah, and that's fine. But then they sit on the shelf and expire, and then you throw them away and you've just lost all that money. Instead, I would say get food that you normally would eat. Just buy a little extra and rotate that stock in your pantry.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. That's really good advice.
Yeah. Or we've got ravioli, right? SpaghettiOs, things like that. But then it hit me, our can opener is electric. Like, we had to go buy a normal can opener, because guess what? If you can't open the daggone thing, it's not going to do you any good.
It doesn't
matter. And we have so much of our life now is based on technology that we have to make sure that we have portable battery banks, and we have additional alternate means of charging those battery banks. So portable solar panels, and those are becoming more and more affordable, and they literally just fold out and you set it out. It's a passive way to recharge those batteries that can then power your cell phone, your ham radio, your electric can opener.
Yeah, right. So, it's interesting that you bring up being able to charge devices and charge equipment, because it's something that we just take for granted, that I can just stick my plug in the wall and it's going to work. But, both of you well, all three of us really are all Texas people, either currently there or have lived there. And I have family there. And I think back to a couple, 3 years ago with the big power issue they had in Texas during the winter. And it was so cold and they had no heat, no power. And it's just the stories coming out of people not being cold and not having the power to be able to heat their houses and food and all that. And the simple act of having a generator that doesn't just provide power for maybe your refrigerator or something like that, but also has the plugs on it, so you can also plug in those cell phones and you can charge
the
devices
heating
and
blanket,
have access.
for God's sake.
Heating blanket,
Yeah.
basic things to think about.
Yeah, and we in the survival community, they talk about bugging out. And bugging out is when you just leave your house, you take your backpack and head off into the woods. And there is some value into that, but I want people to prepare to bug in.
Oh, that's a good one. Yes.
That's a good idea.
And it's still the same equipment. If the power goes out in your house and it's the dead of winter, the snowpocalypse has hit, there's nothing to say you can't set your temp up in your living room, and so you're heating a smaller space with your body heat.
Okay.
And if your house has all your things, your house has, if it's structurally intact, has 4 walls and a roof, you're protected against convection, conduction, all the heat loss methods. Why leave your house?
You know what else my house doesn't have, Glenn? My house doesn't have snakes, Glenn.
Yes. So you have protection. So it gives you so much. Now, there are times when you may have to bug out, and so you want your kit ready because, say you have a rail car derail and you have this poison gas cloud that's coming at you, you want to be able to grab a bag, put it in your car, get the heck out of Dodge. Or a tornado comes through and your house is no longer structurally sound. You want to be able to have enough to survive in an area without that support of your house. So you want to be able to have things that are modular and mobile and then use them where you need to.
Right. Okay, so I'm just going to go out on a limb and I'm going to assume that you have a bag or a tote or a bin that is ready to grab in the case of an emergency. And we are coming to the end of this interview, and I could talk to you, I think, for probably about 3 hours on this topic because it's fascinating. But I'm curious, before we wrap up, I know you have your emergency kit ready to go. What is your advice? What would you tell people to put in a kit if they were going to prepare one for their house, their car? What should they have in it?
Okay. I teach 3 levels of kit. The first one is EDC, everyday carry. And that's, if you're not carrying it every day, then it's not everyday carry. And that could include your school backpack, your purse, or, a fanny pack. And in this, you just want to have a means to purify water, which could be, for me, it's a 1 liter bag with some purify tablets that purify 1 liter. So I've got that covered. And then just a couple granola bars, so I've got food covered. On my backpack, I keep a military poncho because if it's raining, I could just throw it over me, but I can also build a shelter from it. The big thing with kits and things is the more you know, the less you need. So the best thing you can have is knowledge. Those are inversely proportional. Then for
I can see that, actually.
Yeah. Then for my actual bug out bag, I have everything that'll handle Maslow's hierarchy. So I have air, food, water, shelter. And I have enough of those that can last for 3 days. And my wife and I both have kits. And then don't forget your pets. Have dog food or cat food and leashes, harnesses, because you may be rerouted to some kind of shelter, and you want to be able to know that your medical records for your pet, as well as a harness system, so that you can have them under control.
Oh wow, yeah.
And then
I would not have thought about medical records.
Yes, you want
they have that at the vet. So
and I also tell people on a thumb drive, have copies of your identification, your insurance paperwork, your mortgage paperwork, all those things you would need to rebuild your life in an encrypted thumb drive that you keep in your kit so that you can then just hand that over to the insurance people and try to get your life back on track.
Okay. Oh my gosh, that is so just... now that you say it, it sounds so simple and obvious. You're like, oh, well, yeah, of course. That makes perfect sense.
Why haven't I done this already?
Why haven't I done this already? And like, my husband is very thoughtful and considerate in terms of thinking as far as if something ever happened to him, how would our family survive and be, taken care of. And he has, a whole thing of all passwords and everything so that if something happened, I know where I could find all of that. And because he's the one who handles, finances and money, because I don't care to do any of that, but I do need to know where our passwords are and all of our information. So he has made sure that I know about that. And that's, just a good way to care for your family. But then to apply that to my entire household in an emergency situation, where are all those documents online? Do we have a backup? Can we find them quickly? Or do we have them already stashed, ready to go if we had to leave?
Just pick up the bag and go.
Pick up the bag and go. And I'm blown away.
See, that's perfect. That is what I want. Yeah. I want people to have that knowledge, and I want those light bulbs to go off, and I want those aha moments.
Oh, well, you have provided
ding, ding.
a bunch of aha moments during this conversation, and I wish that our interview slots were longer. I will have to talk to the higher-ups about that for future seasons. But for now, we are
out
of time.
Yes.
Yeah, I am confident that we will have to bring you back and talk to you some more. So thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing so much of your expertise with us. It really is helpful to have these conversations and to think literally outside the hospital and outside the box for those disasters that we very easily could find ourselves involved in.
Thank you so much for having me, and I enjoyed speaking with both of you.
Oh, our pleasure, Glenn. Most definitely.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was Dr. Glenn Barnes, Associate Clinical Professor of Nursing at UT Tyler in Tyler, Texas. And Chris, we have run the gamut on conversations. Last week, we talked about codes and how we act and react when a code occurs in the OR. And today, we've left the hospital completely and we've gone out into the wilderness and talked about emergencies that happen, whether natural disasters or because we were doing something crazy out in the woods. But while they're totally different locations, the underlying theme of our ability to be ready, to think clearly, and to act quickly is really the same, no matter where we find ourselves.
Right. That's the whole point, is be ready. Yeah. And Melanie, always time runs out because we have the opportunity to speak with some amazing people. But Melanie, I was taking notes during the last 10 minutes. I literally am like, I have homework now this weekend of things that I need to get ready for. He's just such a wealth of knowledge, but he's fascinating. He pulls you in and it makes you want to take whatever course I could possibly take from this man. I want to take it because I want to absorb every single thing that he has. And I hope our listeners want to do the same.
Yeah, I really felt like a sponge, and I kind of felt like at the same time my mind was just blowing up with light bulbs constantly, because it's like as soon as you say it, you're like, oh yeah, of course. But oh my, so yes, I took lots of notes. I was typing furiously as he talked. And for everyone listening, I mentioned it earlier, but if you want to check out his website, it is crossedarrowstraining.com. That's CROSSEDARROWS training.com. And he has all the information on his courses and what he teaches. And you can certainly find out so much more information on his website as well. But that is going to do it for this week's episode. And huge thanks to Joe Chuya for connecting us so that we could have Dr. Barnes on the show. And on behalf of Chris, myself, and everyone here at First Case, thanks for listening to this week's podcast.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of First Case. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing to First Case on your favorite podcast app or by downloading the smartphone app on iPhone or Android. Simply search for First Case in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@firstcasemedia.com. We look forward to hearing from you.